All right, welcome back to another Learning Tech Talks, where we are continuing to explore the landscape of learning technology, cutting through the fluff, and hopefully making it practical, and actionable. There we go, on what you can actually do with this stuff. I'm really looking forward to this one. I brought back Taylor Blake. Familiar face. This isn't the first time you've been on the show, which is, it's always fun to bring people back again because this space is changing so much. And that's what we're going to talk about, because we are talking about a product that I know just from conversations I have, there is lots of curiosity about it, Taylor. And we were just talking about that before hitting record, because we're talking about Learn-In, which if you're not following the space, they've had seed rounds, they've had funding rounds, they've had success, but there still is people kind of going, what is it? And we're going to answer that question, well, at least to the best of our ability. And Taylor said no questions are off the table. So,
yep.
So that's the plan. I know. And this is why I love our conversations, because we just talk shop and we talk through this stuff. So Taylor, for those who, let's do a little bit of background on you, which, by the way, last time we had this conversation before we went, but you're still where we recorded the last one, which is where, even though the background looks very different.
That's right. I'm in my basement. So this is the basement office.
Okay. There's a fair amount of light coming in that window next to you, though. It doesn't look basement-y.
You know, yes, this window, and I've got to show you. You ready for the
okay, yeah, I love this. Oh.
So I made this like fake green wall inside of
oh, is that like the egress thing, that ugly metal thing usually?
Yeah. So now it looks a little nicer. You know, I spend so much
time
down here. Yeah, it's fake, but
really?
But now it looks
nice. It looks very Amazon jungle-ish. I like it. It feels like you're in a greenhouse. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, you got good lighting. You got a nice nature view outside your window. And then location-wise, so you're in the basement, but basement where? Your house in Utah?
Salt Lake City, Utah.
All right. Well, I'm where I always am. My background hasn't changed since yours has. I don't have cool shift in direction or any cool plants out my window, and I won't turn my camera around, because then you'll just see a car parked in front of my window. But so you've been with Learn-In now. How long has Learn-In been going?
Just over 2 years.
2 years. Okay. All right. And it's been a journey, and you joined. So let's talk a little bit about it, because some folks, while I'm familiar with it, we keep in touch pretty regularly. Some folks may not be as familiar with Learn-In. So how do you, again, we talked about this a little bit, describe it? And we're going to go into more detail to answer what it is. But I am curious, because it's been on a journey. We're going to take a trip down memory lane here after this. But now when you get asked, because you're at a conference, I think, next week. So when people come up and say, hey, Learn-In, what do you say you are?
Yeah, well, the latest messaging that we've really been focused on is around academies. So we help companies set up internal talent academies. And by that, we basically mean, because gosh, every company means something different when they think about academies. But we're saying, hey, look, this is a place for you to invest in your employees' development, up-level their skills, up-level their talent. And we really want to think about employee skill development more holistically. So what's everything that you need to give your employees to make sure they're successful, so that whatever key skill talent areas you have, leadership, data science, finance, whatever it is, how do we make that really work inside of your organization? So, part of me, it's hard because it's like I'm using all the same words that all the other vendors are using. Okay, but and we can sort of show some examples of how we bring that to life and how it's a little bit different.
Well, and I think the two words we kind of continued to resonate on before we hit record was cohesion, and that's in the title of the slide. It's kind of creating a cohesive environment for these things. And then also that holistic approach, because as we've had conversations before, I think there is a greater awareness that development doesn't happen in a single snapshot or through a single medium. It's kind of this, well, all right, there's a lot of moving pieces to make that happen. So how do you pull it all together? But let's do it. Let's do the trip down memory lane with this, because this has been a journey for you. It's 2 years, and it didn't start with that. So how has learning evolved? And then we'll dig into, okay, what does its current iteration look like?
Yeah. So, well, and even before Learn-In, myself and a lot of the Learn-In team came from Degreed. So
Yeah.
Degreed,
That's
and I like
where the
to
name
think,
recognition comes from. People are like, oh wait, isn't that the Degree group?
yeah, yeah. So, Degreed, and here's kind of my personal story, focused on my own skill development at Degreed, which was, so I was doing product management at Degreed.
Okay.
And Degreed was such an amazing tool to help me iterate and level up on what it means to be a good product manager. I'd watch it, I'd watch a little video, I'd read an article, I'd listen to a podcast. It was always just these little kind of building blocks. But then there came this point where I wanted to develop sort of a whole new skill set that I didn't have before, which was data
Okay.
analytics. I said,
So you had some background in product management, so it was more sharpening your skills.
yeah, sharpening my skills and using Degreed and those sorts of kind of micro learning, just in time learning, really, really, really great. I struggled when I was trying to develop sort of this brand new skill set around data analytics. I kept starting and stopping and starting and stopping and just so then, what I did was I said, gosh, I need something to actually help me get through this learning curve, because this is going to be a journey. This isn't going to be, I can't just kind of pick up one book or watch one video or do one course.
Listen to a podcast and a YouTube video and go, I'm a data scientist now.
Yeah, yeah. So I enrolled in a master's program in data analytics because I thought, gosh, that's going to
You went
do it.
all in. Yeah, there you go.
Let's go all in. And then, oh my goodness, that was, I only got halfway through. I only got halfway through my master's program. I was like, this is so hard. And it was so disconnected from the work that I was doing in my job. And it was so theoretical. And it was good in the ways that, yes, it did force me to learn, and it had that accountability, and it had that, I spent hours and hours against that program. But it still felt like, gosh, okay, so how do we help people? So I'd sort of experienced these sort of two ends of the spectrum, the articles and videos and podcasts to sharpen my skills. But what if I really need to develop a whole new skill set, go through that learning journey? Do I quit my job and go back to school?
Which historically a lot of people did. Like if you were going back to grad school, it's like, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to go get an MBA, and that's my job for the next 2 years.
And I concluded from that experience, I don't know how anyone does this. I don't know how anyone does this while working. I don't know how anyone quits their job and forgoes salary for 2 years to do this and then try to bring those skills back into the workplace. This is so hard. I admire anyone who's done it, but there's got to be a better model for really developing new skill sets, developing yourself while you're working. So how do we bring that model into the workplace? And that's really what that was kind of the premise that we started Learn-In around. How do we do more of this macro learning journey type experience?
It's that middle ground. It's that, because I think, I mean, if you think about it, I just think back to undergrad. You went into undergrad and it was like, well, you didn't really have anything else. You're kind of continuing your K-12 journey, and you went off to college and you did your thing and you bounced around, and I don't know about you, but changed your major a few times, and then you finished it and it was like, well, now it's time to go to work type of a thing. But I remember grad school and I did it while working, and I think the only reason I stuck with it was because it was relevant to my job.
Mm-hmm.
But even that was painful, and it was brutal. It was brutal.
I believe it. And when you think, this is the new model of work and learning, is that you can't just go to school and then work for the rest of your career. There are going to be these moments where you need to level up your skill set, your career while you're working. And increasingly, companies need this. I mean, so to feel so much pain from the individual side, and to hear so many companies saying, we need more data scientists. We're transforming our business and we need skill and talent to support this transformation. But we found that, just getting a LinkedIn Learning subscription isn't, getting people from A to B. So it just seemed like there was a big opportunity here. So
Okay.
that's kind of where we started.
That's kind of where you started. Well, and I think that if anything, and I'm curious, and this will kind of tie to the history journey on how things have evolved, but I have to imagine, because I'm just thinking what we talked about and what you shared with us. And historically, this has kind of been how it's been, is there were maybe you were making little edges or improvements on your skills that were existing ones, which you could do through I'm listening to a podcast, I'm having regular conversations, I'm watching this and that, and I'm iterating on the skills that I have. But if it was, you fundamentally need to retune skills that you don't have and you've never used before. Historically, companies kind of it was more of a, well, that's on you. Go figure it out. Go back to school and you can either quit your job or we'll help you through it, but only in the sense that we'll maybe reimburse some of your tuition. And that's it. Other than that, you're on your own, unless you had a really good boss who really wanted to work with you and all of this kind of stuff. But I would say in the last 2 years, as employees have taken a little bit more of the reins back and said, like, I'm not going to take on all the responsibility, all the stress, all the work of doing this, all for your benefit because you want all of this. So I'm curious if you've seen the receptiveness to, hey, the old way of doing this, the employees are pretty much rebelling, saying, that's not going to work for me. If you expect me to build some of these skills for the future of work or whatever, you're going to have to put your money where your mouth is and not just tuition reimbursement. I mean, you're going to actually have to invest in that.
Yeah, I think there's kind of three big changes, transitions. One was the Great Resignation and, the power shifting to employees, right?
Yeah.
And companies woke up and said,
the power dynamics moved.
yeah,
big
how
time.
do we retain our employees? How do we attract employees? So the Great Resignation, that was a strong shift. I think it's also, there's been some maturity in terms of, the past kind of 5 years or so, there's been all of this great content that's, that companies have been making available to their employees, lots of content. And I think lots of companies have been purchasing this content, creating content, putting it into systems. And they've had that for long enough now that they're realizing, this is accomplishing some things for us, but just having a lot of content, we're now also realizing that there's some shortcomings.
So with that one, and I'm curious on number 3, but number 2, so the way you'd frame that, just kind of to reframe it which makes sense to me. And I would say I've seen this trend is there was historically this idea that once we get to the right level of content, this problem will fix itself.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's enough organizations, there's been enough democratization of content, there's enough access to things that there's a greater awareness that, oh, okay, that's not going to get us all the way there. I mean, it's an important step. We don't want to neglect it. And I've seen companies swing too far the other way. It's like, no, you still need it, but that's not going to carry you to the end. It's only going to get you so far.
Yeah, I think that was the milestone for a lot of companies. As soon as everyone has access to relevant content, then, our job will be done and kind of let's see.
We've arrived.
And a lot of companies have gotten there, right? And now they're starting to say, this helped in a lot of ways, but there's still gaps.
Okay.
So I think that realization, I'd call that the second one. And then the third one, oh gosh. I had it a second ago. I'm
sorry. That's totally my fault.
No.
Okay.
It'll
So
come back to me.
It'll come back to you. Okay. All right. So we had the Great Resignation, which I agree. I think the power dynamics shifted. Employees had way more say over what this was. And the content one, I think that speaks to the maturity of where organizations are, where you go, well, maybe you've been on that journey. So go ahead. It looks like number 3 popped back.
Got it. And the third one was the iterative change and improvement, where employees can just sort of, if you're changing slow enough as a business and as an individual, employees can just pick things up as they go, right?
Yep.
There's some capacity for just iterative improvement where people are just going to figure it out.
Yeah.
But post-COVID, there's a number of there's enough business transformations happening and technology and sort of the pace of change has increased enough that companies are now saying we
Counting
can't
on
just
that.
rely on employees picking it up sort of while they're on the job.
Okay.
We need to actually invest. The gap is now big enough that we actually have to pay attention to it and have to figure out how to address it.
Okay. That makes sense. And I think what's interesting about that, I had a couple conversations over the past few weeks on this topic where it was kind of it was acceptable, but it also kind of worked where things moved at a pace where you had enough people that could keep up that were able to bring others along for the ride. And you could kind of go, well, we're changing, but it's not so dramatic that nobody can keep pace. We have enough people keeping pace that the rest of the organization they'll lag behind, but they'll move with it. And then I would say, like you said, in the past couple of years, it just went,
Yeah.
and even those front runners who were there are going, I can't even keep on the front end of it. Like I'm not even there yet to even help bring other people along. And by the time I get there, we've moved again.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still having a hard time keeping on top of it.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So it's been the accelerator for a lot of things, which I think that's why we're seeing. I mean, I don't know about, well, I'm sure you have this in the conversation you're having, but I feel like skills and where the workforce is in just about every conversation I have, and not just in learning. I mean, it's in business conversations, in HR it's pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you ask sort of companies they recognize the skills are important for their business, they have critical skill gaps, what are they doing? Gosh, even the best companies out there are struggling to actually figure out how to drive outcomes, drive performance, close these gaps. So.
Okay. Well, and I agree with you on that. I think even anybody who says we've cracked it, they're posturing a bit because it's like you haven't cracked you haven't cracked it. And some of it is, and I think this is where we have a unique opportunity to get ahead of it. In many ways, I find a lot of organizations, they're still defining their business strategy in some regards of where are we going as a business. And they aren't 100% sure on that yet, which means, well, we actually aren't 100% sure what we need from the workforce to tie to that, which makes this a really opportune time to figure this out. How do we bridge these gaps? Because it's going to be, at least in my career, one of the first times in history, we actually have the potential to get in front of the curve versus being on the tail end where it's like, well, now we're here, we're way over here, and we're looking to you to go, can you at least get caught up with where the rest of us are? We can actually almost leapfrog in many regards.
Yeah. If companies can move fast enough.
Yeah.
Because really, there's a lot of companies who say, we're going to analyze sort of where does our business need to be 3 to 5 years?
Yeah.
What skills do we need? What skills do we have? Building the initiatives to close the gaps. And, by the time they get through all that, things have changed enough that they got to kind of do it all over again. So a lot of it is, yes, the opportunity is definitely there.
The opportunity is there if we do it right.
Yeah, we got to do it right. We got to make it easier and faster for companies to be able to, identify these areas of need and kind of get their initiatives up and going.
So then that ties to what has Learnin been doing to pivot based on that? If you started in one spot, now these three trends really accelerated over the last 2 years. How has that shifted what you're working on?
Yeah, and I can show the product, which even shows some of the evolution of where we started and sort of how we've grown.
Here's where we answer the mystery of what is it?
What is it?
What is it?
So this is where, all right. So we started with this premise of to really close this skill gap, you need more than content, right? You need practice and application.
Got to go beyond
and
content.
Coaching. You got all this stuff. You need these experiences. We said, what's the easiest way to enable that for organizations quickly at scale? We thought, hey, if you've got, a handful of people who need to become cybersecurity experts, maybe you don't have to build all of that experiential learning yourself. There's a lot of great cybersecurity programs, experiences,
Okay.
courses, workshops out there. So the first iteration of Learn In was, let's make it easy to sponsor your employees where you have, key skill talent gaps, sponsor them to take advantage of the best external courses, programs, workshops, experiences.
Okay.
So that's what
Which
you're
is kind of
seeing.
bringing some of that degreed mentality of curating this stuff. Hey, we don't need to create all of these unique experiences because they exist. It's just most of the time, either we don't know they're out there or people don't have access to them, or there's really no way to see what's happening with it. So kind of how do we bring that together and make it more accessible? Is that fair?
Yeah. So very similar idea there. I mean, the key difference was Degreed was for the short form, informal
Yes.
articles, videos, books, and we're talking about sort of
Long form macro learning.
long form macro learning, right? And it introduces this new set of challenges. Well, this is going to require investment, right? These things cost
Dollars.
money. They take time, approvals. Who do we select? How do we make sure the right
Yeah, we're
people
not
are
sending YouTube links and podcast links. This is
right?
dollars
It's
and cents.
dollars and cents. So, but that's where we started was how do we enable this external macro learning? So we introduced the idea of, hey, we've got these virtual cards and you
Okay.
can set this up any number of ways, right? You can give employees a learning budget. Maybe it's $500 a year. Maybe it's uh, we can replace or enhance your education benefits. So a lot of big
Okay.
companies have 5250 to go towards, college degree programs. So whether it's education benefits or learning stipends or even just ad hoc. So this is set up for, an upfront budget of $3,000. But some
Okay.
companies, they say, look, we don't want to set up a budget, but if someone raises their hand and says, hey, I, would really like to take this course or this program or go to this
I can
conference,
put in a request.
I can put in a request, it can be approved. And then you can have the funds on your virtual card to go pay for it. So lots of different ways of setting it up. So the virtual cards, and the idea here is that companies can then curate sort of this marketplace of these macro sort of learning programs. So
Okay.
certifications and certificates and, um, across a wide range of providers, and I can request approval. So
Okay.
that
Which
was,
people historically were on their own to do before. If
yeah, I
if
mean,
you
because
needed you a lot of times we're on your own to do. It was like, well, I need to build this skill. I need to kind of figure out where opportunities to build it are. And then, I mean, I'm just thinking even my own personal journey. You'd go to your boss and go, I really want to do this thing. Is this something the company would support? And then maybe yes, maybe no. If it's yes, you're putting it on a P card. And then it goes off into the ether.
right. So, it's all kind of done ad hoc, manually. There's no visibility against the spend. So this was, hey, you can now curate and recommend and say, hey, if you are, a product manager, we're really encouraging our product managers to learn data analytics, and these are the programs that we recommend. So if
Okay.
one of these catches your attention, request approval. So there was better curation, better guidance, better visibility, um, better
Okay.
tracking, and you can also do it for books or subscriptions, or this extended to conferences, other things that cost money would require approval.
Okay.
So that's where we started. That was kind of the first iteration. Do you want to hear some of the challenges? I
Oh,
mean, we knew there were some
I
challenges,
was
right?
about to just pepper you with some, but I'm
Okay.
curious to hear without even seeding it what you ran into.
Okay, here's a few of the things that we ran into. One, our value proposition was around, hey, we can make uh, your the money you're already spending, education benefits or training budgets, or the money you're already spending, we can make it more impactful, right? We can
Okay.
align it to your skill and talent needs. But oftentimes we'd get looped in with the education benefits folks.
Yep.
And you know what they care about? They care about sort of, is this easy to administer? Is there work involved, compliance? They're not as worried about the sort of, what are
Okay.
the skill and talent impacts?
Okay.
So it
It's
brought
much
in,
more tactical and operational, just
yeah.
mitigating risk.
So sometimes it had us caught in between education benefits folks and L&D folks and different stakeholders and different processes and these silos, right?
Yeah.
So that was one challenge.
Which I remember when you were going through this asking, I mean, this was a while ago when you were asking people, how does your tuition reimbursement programs work today? And we're trying to better understand what this is. And it was a very different audience of people. I would say many learning leaders, if you asked, how do you do your reimbursement for your, undergrad or graduate programs, most L&D leaders would go, I have no idea.
Yeah, they really don't know.
I don't even know what the policy is.
They really don't know. So that was one big challenge.
Okay.
Another big challenge here is that, this starts to become cross-functional without any clear owner. Who's in charge of making sure that the education benefits and the training budgets and sort of all this ad hoc spend that there's not great visibility around and there's inefficiency, like who's in charge of really wrapping their arms around that and
Okay.
optimizing it? And,
So it becomes a game of hot potato. It's like, this isn't really managed now. We don't have visibility. It's been kind of an accepted cost of business. And you're looking for somebody to go, I'm going to raise my hand and I'm going to take that on as additional work to what I'm doing to try and solve this for our organization. And people kind of played hot potato of, no, not me. I think maybe you should talk to this over here.
Totally. Now, the exceptions are there's a number of companies who do think holistically about this. Learning and benefits, they're aligned. They might report into the CLO. So those people, they have an easier time getting on board. Or if the company's small enough where they haven't built up these silos, that's another one where, hey, this is actually, so those were the challenges. And I don't want to sort of, minimize the fact that this can be so impactful. Just this, I'm going to show you some other stuff.
That's the thing. I mean, challenges aside, this is a major problem. And in big organizations, it's a problem that I think too often is glossed over as like, we just don't really think about it. I mean, I remember one time pulling the financials just from P card spend that got associated with training. And we were talking major dollars being spent on nobody knew what. Literally nobody knew what. I mean, this was millions and millions of dollars. So this isn't just like, it's no big deal. But I think the challenge you're highlighting is getting somebody to say, that's a problem that I want to own and I want to solve in a large company can be difficult.
Right. Yep. I mean, the other big benefit here is to be able to say, we spoke about the Great Resignation, sort of how you invest in your people, to be able to tell employees, hey, we're putting $500 on this card for you, and here you go, and we want to support your growth and development, and we're going to align it to the things that we need as a business. That is really, really powerful. That is really powerful. So, and a number of companies have kind of overcome those challenges and are having lots and lots of success with this.
Okay.
But what we realized was,
I can also see with that, with this whole employee power shift, like you said, this does enable you to say, no, we care about your development. And so much so, here you go. Like, we can actually tell you, this is what it is in layman's terms. When you want to develop, you have this thing, you go do what you need to do for your development, and we're investing in it. That's a hard thing to do when you're like, well, there's like an LMS with a bunch of stuff that you could do. And I mean, I guess it's a lot harder than what you're showing on the screen right now.
I mean, this makes it so tangible and so
it's real,
right? Go find the program, request approval. We'll put the money on the card for you. Go spend it. We'll make sure you're successful. So quick, easy, impactful. But so now there's kind of two evolutions of how we've built on this. So the next one, let me jump over here. A number of companies said, look, we're bought into this idea of we need more than just content. We need to create a set of experiences. We need the practice and application. But sometimes we want to deliver that internally. We don't want to just outsource it.
Okay.
right? Because we want to contextualize it, or, it's very specific to our business. So we said, great, let's, and first it was like, well, aren't you doing this today? Isn't this your job as L&D to sort of create these
Yeah.
experiences? And
Okay.
the response came back, yes, but there's gaps in the tools that we have, and it's really hard, and it's really time intensive. And
Okay.
so we said, great. So we have the ability for you to sponsor employees to take external programs.
Okay.
But now we're going to give you tools to help you build and deliver internal programs, custom programs. So
Okay.
this can be, a cohort-based learning experience where there's some curriculum. It's really hands-on. There's projects and assignments, things that you're asked to do and submit so you can get feedback on. You're learning with a group. So I can see, I'm here with this learning group. They can see my progress. I can see theirs. They can see my progress. And there's live sessions and there's discussions, and we can integrate
Okay.
with Slack or Teams. So you can have this nice program-like experience that you can build, you can contextualize.
Okay. Which from a so let me kind of, and again, it sounds like you're adding to point next iteration. So the first one was curating this external formal macro learning in a way that then you've got visibility. It makes it easy for people to see, hey, here's our investment. You've got the power to go do it, type of a thing. Inevitably, like you said, I think then there is the, okay, that's great. But we do have some of these things internally that we run and manage, and they are this hybrid. I think the buzzword now is cohort learning,
Yep.
right? Almost this cohort learning of we
Mhm.
need to take people through, and we're running this. We don't have good ways of managing that. And I would say most learning tech, there's a handful out there that are specializing in this area, but I would say most are not really designed to optimize that kind of experience. It really is more, hey, there's digital content nuggets that you can kind of go through and we can structure, but this broader experiential learning thing is not a big focus for most.
Yeah. And this was one of kind of my biggest points of learning, which was reframing this from, because honestly, very few companies are looking for a better way to financially sponsor employees to do external programs.
Okay.
And very few companies are actually looking for, I need a tool that allow me to do cohort-based learning experiences. What they're looking for, the language they use is, we have a skill or talent gap in
Okay.
cybersecurity or data science, right? So being able to frame this as, look, what's the skill or talent gap that you're facing? Is it, our sort of project managers need to learn XYZ, whatever it is. Great. Well, now you have both tools in your toolkit to say, great, does it make sense to go external? Do we sponsor your employees to do a PMI certification? Or do you want to build and deliver a program internally, and reframing it that way, starting with the need of what is the
Okay.
outcome that you're looking for? And we'll give you flexibility across, you can buy it or you can build it, and you can optimize
It's
for
all
whatever you're
here.
optimizing for.
Okay.
And you can easily do that. And that was a big shift. And that's really what started to connect the dots for a lot of companies, because they're saying,
Okay.
great. Yeah, it just fits exactly sort of the outcome they're looking for.
That makes sense in this fact that, like I said, I talk to a lot of tech, and I would say even in either of those niches, there's not a lot of players in the space. So in the kind of top space of curating external, kind of bringing that together, I can think of one. And then there's like a couple in the internal program cohort design. But to your point, the challenge I think sometimes is that can feel almost, the challenge you can face is that can feel very niche and specific. So to try and get senior executive buy-in on, okay, wait, why do we need to buy a platform specifically for that? That doesn't feel like a problem that's so compelling that we're really going to dive deep and make investment in. But if it sounds, so you brought the two together and said, hey, no, that's just two activities that really ties to bridging this macro learning gap that you're dealing with, that you may have things internally you're doing, but you also have to have things externally, and we have to bring those two together if you're actually going to solve for it.
Yeah. And, the other thing, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, is the threshold for new tools, new
It's
platforms,
really
new
low,
products, right?
or high.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
high.
high. right?
Super high.
There's platform fatigue, right? There's product fatigue. Do we need another vendor? Gosh, right? So if what you're
No, I
offering
know.
is this super niche, yeah, it'd be great in some cases. So we really needed to say, no, look, this is for any skill and talent need across your business, and you likely have, hundreds of them, and you're not serving, you're not meeting your employees, offering them these kind of deep transformational learning experiences that they need. Here with kind of both options, now you can meet all of those. There's more flexibility. So that's, and when we bring those two things together, the other evolution here is, what do we call this? How do we describe this? I mean, you've stuck around for 35 minutes as I've kind of walked through the thinking.
No, but I think it's helpful. And again, what do we call this piece? But this is, I mean, there's a lot of real challenges that we're talking about here. So that's where, as it's been interesting watching you on this journey, because I mean, we've been in LinkedIn conversations back and forth on this, where it's like, how do we actually bring this together and help grab people's attention? Because again, the platform fatigue, I live it and breathe it on an almost weekly basis, where you go, okay, this would be great, but can we really justify the need to do something? And again, IT is getting just pounded right now with everybody going distributed and remote, and everybody wants a new tool for this and that. And, I found this new thing. And if anything, there's a lot of effort for consolidation, which I get. But the problem is it's leading to a lot of organizations missing opportunities because they're like, we're just not even going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So then you had to figure out how to describe the thing.
Describe it. And this was really a moment of, one of the biggest challenges of being an entrepreneur and trying to start something new is that you need so much conviction in the world needs something new, and you go out there, but then eventually you realize, I'm not as smart as I thought I was, right? Like, and going through that process, and I've had to go through it, which was, hey, hey, companies, this is the way it should be, sort of check this out, to, you know what, let me reframe this and let me ask a lot of questions and let me listen. And I'm sure a lot of people on LinkedIn, I've talked to so many people on LinkedIn, and I appreciate sort of every single one of you in terms of me being able to ask questions. And so many companies started to tell me, we faced a similar challenge where we wanted to get above and beyond just access to content. We wanted a richer experience, more holistic development, and we're calling those academies at our company. I'll say, interesting. Tell me more about that. And what I found is, more and more companies started describing academies, how they're creating them, how they want to create them, but how it takes a lot of time and resources and energy and, full-time headcount to sort of manage these academies. And we thought, what if instead of, let's find what's working out there? Where are the sort of success stories? And we found a lot of success stories around academies. We thought, how can we make better tools to let more companies be able to create and deliver these academies? So we thought, that's a great name. That's what these companies are calling them. So we've started to call it an academy, this way to bring together sort of the internal programs, the external programs, other resources and experiences that are going to really help, your employees develop in these key skill and talent areas.
Okay. Well, and I think even for me, that clarification is extremely helpful, because I think I was one of the ones who jumped on the Academy's post on LinkedIn. I was like, it's feeling a little bit like a rebranded university thing we're talking about now, in terms of, well, it's a micro university, pathway type of a thing. But I think that distinction that you're making there, which is the approach you're bringing to academies, isn't, we won't mention names, but there's some academies out there that I think sometimes people associate with, well, this is just yet another form of content, right? It's just another rebranded form of content, maybe structured a different way. And what you're talking about is less about, well, no, we're actually enabling that academy mentality of, you start here and you move here, where you're almost more of like this academy enablement piece versus, we're building a bunch of academies that then we're going to sell to you as a subscription to, our academies type of a thing. And I think that's where my reaction to it at first was, do we need another academy type of a thing in the market? I don't know that we do, but that's hearing your iterative journey and what you're talking about. It isn't really, well, we're building a bunch of academies that then we're going to try and get you to enroll in. It's no, we're bringing that academy enablement to your organization, which really is what people have been looking for.
Yeah, that was such an interesting LinkedIn post because there were so many strong opinions, and I was able to follow up and ask a lot of people, tell me about what does an academy look like inside your organization? Some people just use it as a name for their LMS. Some people use it as a way of differentiating the L&D team. Some people it's just, it's the old school corporate university that they've decided to call an academy for some reason. So there's a lot of, there is some baggage. There's kind of some different expectations, but the way that here's the use case that I hope we can enable for companies. Okay. When you're interviewing someone, I really would love for companies to be able to say, look, we are going to help you grow faster in your career, learn new skills, develop yourself more than anyone else out there. And let me show you how. Let me pull up this academy. This is an academy that, our product organization, this is our product academy. And there's programs that we've built and there's external programs, and we're going to bring in, speakers, and there's workshops, and there's, experiential learning opportunities. And if you join our company, you're going to be able to participate in this product academy, and it's going to be a game changer for you and your career, for you at work. So this is something that we want companies, like you said, we want to enable companies to build these academies and really have it be a competitive advantage. Yeah, for recruiting, for developing, for being successful as a business.
Well, and there's two things that come out of that come to mind for me. And this ties back to my conversation with Stacia recently on this one. This goes back to this whole holistic approach to thinking about your talent, and tying the pieces together between the way you're recruiting and bringing in talent, the way you're developing them, the way you're maintaining, the way you're mobilizing them within an organization. This has historically been a siloed, scattershot type of approach, and for good reasons. I think a lot of times people haven't really known what to do. So to your use case, if you were hiring somebody into an org and they said, what does development look like for me? Most hiring managers couldn't answer that question. They could answer, well, here's what you'll be doing. But if it was, what does development look like for me? That often was met with some resistance because, like, well, I don't know about the promotion pathway, or they didn't know. Where here it gives a concrete answer to, well, here's what development looks like. Everybody who becomes this in our organization has growth pathways, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. It might be promotional stuff. It might not. It might just be skill development or latitudinal movement type of a thing, but there's a concrete answer to that question when at a time when employees are evaluating everything right now, everything. And when you answer that question of what does development look like for me, and you go, and you respond with all the tactical activities they'll be doing on a day-to-day basis. I've watched people just turn the other corner and go, no, that's not really what I'm looking for right now. Thanks, though, because I've got 4 other competitive offers from companies who had a much better answer to that question than you did.
Yeah, and I think it's a great, it's a great test to see how well we're doing as an organization. If you were really trying to sell someone on why they should join your company and they ask that question, would you want to pull up your LMS and say, well, let me show you the LMS and here's sort of the e-learning modules that we have? Like, that's probably not compelling enough, right? So what is that way that we can say, and I do really like the term academies, because I think about, sports teams, right? The best soccer teams in the world have academies. Ferrari driving school has an academy. Like ballet, the best, ballet organizations, they have these academies. It's this holistic, and it's this really special, honestly, thing to be a part of if you're part of one of these academies, because it means that this organization is really investing in you. They're investing holistically in you because they want you to be sort of the future of the team, the company, the organization. So I think a feeling that I want to help companies enable is like, wow, I feel really lucky. I feel really special. I really feel like my company is investing in me. They're giving me opportunities that I wouldn't get elsewhere. And I think, workplace learning so often falls so, far from that. So how can we really create that feeling, that experience?
Well, and I'm gonna go to the other side of the coin on this, because you said I could ask you anything, because I am curious how you're tackling one of these. But one of the other things that I think with this is, as you look at the talent market right now, and I think this again goes back to this: how can learning leaders have this strategic talent conversation with the C-suite and with their leaders? We just talked about the competitive advantage of, hey, here's how we develop you and what your growth looks like in this company. You have a concrete answer to that question. I think the other one is, you look at how difficult it can be right now to hire good talent, because people can choose from just about anything. And so when managers encounter people who may not have 100% of the gaps, you may go, well, they're 80% of 100. I really like them, but I think they're lacking here. I've seen that where a lot of times they go, but I'm not going to move this person forward because I need that 100%, because they don't know what to do about it. It's like they've got this 30% gap. I don't know how to fill it. And I can't hire someone right now with the pace of business, with everything going on, knowing that 30% of the job, I don't know how to help them with that. And the rest of the team's strapped, and I can't count on them to kind of carry that 30% of dead weight. And I think that's where actually opening up opportunity for, hey, look, you don't have to find your rainbow unicorn for every job, because there is an answer to how do you actually prepare these people for the job that's in front of them.
Yeah, no, it really opens up the talent pipeline. It lets you be more inclusive. And it also, if you think about those two scenarios, say you have to, really, say you're not confident in your ability to develop your employees. So you do have to find the rainbow unicorn. You have to pay them a lot of money, and they've got 100, maybe they're overqualified. Maybe they have 100% of the skills you need inside the role. What are they going to be thinking a year or two from now, right? They're going to be thinking, I've done all this before. I'm bored.
This is old news.
Yeah. You find the person who's 80% and really excited. You say 80%, that's no problem, because we have this really effective academy to help get you to where you need to be. Gosh, they're going to be invested. They're going to be excited. They're going to be, just really engaged. Yeah. My guess is a year or two, into being on the job, they're going to just continue to be excited. And when you give people opportunities for learning and growth, they bring something extra. To work.
No, but opening up the talent pool. I mean, going back to business problem for organizations, this is a big one. And organizations are quickly having to adapt to the fact that you have to be okay with hiring the 60, 70%, because if you're waiting on that 100%, it's not going to happen. You're either not going to find them, or so much time is going to pass. You're going to lose so much momentum on what's happening. Your head's going to be on the chopping block, because you're going to go, well, I mean, what are you doing type of a thing. So I think that's a tangible problem that you can present to say, this is why this matters. Now, the flip side of that is, though, I am curious, because this sounds great, but in practicality, so often I find managers and folks, they're just trying to get through the end of the day. They're just trying to get the job done type of a thing. And I am curious with this, because this again goes back to the challenge of enterprise learning functions and even functional learning functions, where they go, I don't really know exactly what a development academy looks like for these roles. The only person who really does are the people either leading it or in it. How do I actually do this and get something to them? Because if we're waiting on them to define what an academy looks like, it's probably not going to happen. And opening the floodgates to people to go, you own your own development, figure it out. We've also seen swing the pendulum too far that way, and people just are either paralyzed and don't do anything, or they pick stuff that's like, well, that's not even really what your development should look like. I get that's fun for you, but that's not really what is enjoyable for you and is adding value. So how are you helping close that gap? Because that's a real gap that in theory sounds great, but in practice, I've been kicked in the teeth more times than I'd like to count on that one.
Yep. It really does need to be a partnership between the, L&D and the lines of business. I heard when I was asking someone about academies that they had run in the past, they said, for each academy, we had a dean of the academy. And it was it was the VP of data science. It was the VP of marketing. It was the functional leader. And they had this, official sort of ownership role of the academy. And what that did was, when you're able to engage the business in that, they're able to they know what they need. So you're able to get, and really setting up one of these academies. And there is a view that I didn't even show where you can say, look, we've got levels and each level can have different programs. I mean, setting it up is drag and drop. It's pretty simple. You could do it in kind of 20 minutes. So if we can get the business involved, if we can say, look, that we need, more cybersecurity expertise inside of your department, help us map out what that looks like. Help us map out what are going to be the most effective programs and experiences to develop that expertise. Is it internal programs? Is it external programs? So we're trying to involve sort of the rest of the business more. We're trying to make the tools really easy to use.
Easy for them to do.
So that, we don't get stuck in this, it's really hard to build and, L&D is trying to do it. And it should just be sort of easy to spin up, easy to get going.
Okay. Well, and I think that's an important, and again, the work involved in what you just described cannot be understated. I think that's one of the things, at least in my experience, I've found, and where a lot of people have great intentions and just, it's like, oh, which goes back to what we fall back on sometimes, which is you'll just kind of offshoot and go, I don't know, let's just go buy an academy, whatever, plural site, this and that, and let's just let them tell us what it is. And then you get the feedback, well, that's not specific enough to what we need as a business. And then the other tendency is, well, you dump it all back on the business with no real structure or support and say, well, you do it. And they're not going to do it. They don't have the time, the know-how, the capacity to build that out. And then it just doesn't happen. And so I think what we're talking about and what you're highlighting here is there's some real work to do to say, if you're going to do this, you need to have some formal operations and structure in place to say, okay, fine. If you're the head of cybersecurity and you say, we've got a real skills gap, you need to do some of that legwork to work with that business partner to say, what skin in the game are you going to put into here in terms of owning that? Because there is real ownership associated with that. And I'm just thinking, having been through this, the organizational commitment and change and representation from the business on that, they need to know what they're in for. And if you just sell it as like, just, whip up an academy type of a thing, and then they get into it and go, oh, like I actually have to be accountable for whether this is actually getting me the results of what I say I need. I mean, there's a fair amount there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there certainly is, and I think, and some of this, because I've seen this as well, it feels like there's this big gap from sort of 0 to 1, like getting started. We have to have everything figured out. This feels like a huge shift.
Yeah.
The more we can make this iterative to say, look, here's some ways to get started. But this thing can be organic and it can live and grow and change over time, and we can tweak it to, meet our needs. And, we don't have all the programs built out from the get-go, but we have we have one program that we've been working on. We want to supplement it with a couple external courses, programs, or certifications, whatever. Let's start there, and we can continue to sort of build this out as time goes on. I think that's the other key piece, is getting away from this. It has to be perfect and it has to be complete and comprehensive from the get-go.
Yeah. No, it's a fair call out because I think that is sometimes the tendency is to be like, well, we have to solve this for everyone perfectly before we do anything.
Yeah.
And that will put you in a state of you're just never going to get anywhere. And I think that's one of the things that, having gotten some of these things set up successfully in the past, it is that let's focus on a pain point. Let's try and make it better than it is today. That business partnership has to be there. You kind of can't be like, well, we'll just skip over that and maybe figure that out later. Like, no, but then kind of, all right, let's baby step into this. And then as it grows and evolves, because I think some of it has just been even figuring out what does that process look like in your org? And that's going to depend on what is your org structure? How is L&D structured? Where do resources sit? What kind of commitment can you as an enterprise bring to the functions? Do they have dedicated resources there? How do you actually govern some of this stuff? I mean, I think there's a lot of things that you can think through, but starting small. And that's where I'm curious. So for folks who are getting on this train, are there areas where you're seeing massive success in some of those baby steps that people are taking to get that across?
Yeah. So, there's kind of been two different approaches. Some have just been, look, we don't have everything figured out yet, but we want to really enable our employees. We're going to start with a learning stipend or learning budget
Okay.
and just see let's see where that takes us. Let's see where,
Okay.
So that's kind of been the easiest way to get started is let's take some of the kind of budget we already have, run it through Learn-In. But then, I've been surprised. There have been a number of companies who have said, look, we have a program or an academy or this learning map that we've been building and we need a tool. And it's like we
have kind of a concept, but we don't really have anywhere to execute it yet.
Right. So we're saying, look, let's take what you already have and, they're building it on a microsite or in some PDF or some, present PowerPoint presentation. And they're just kind of looking around saying, do we try to shove this into the LMS? Like, what does that look like? Do we have to build something custom? What does that look like? So I've actually been surprised. It's been less of creating these net new from scratch and more of, we've done a lot of the legwork already. Please give us the tool so that we can plug it in and kind of make this thing happen.
Okay. No, and I think that's a good, we can kind of close on that one because I do think that's a good approach to take with this. Because again, the budget piece, while we said, not necessarily the easiest to get, people to go, wow, this is a major strategic business problem. It is tremendous value that you can add to the organization and does make a nice insertion point to go, wouldn't it be great if we could at least do that and then have the capability for some of these bigger macro skills that we're building to actually do it? Because I can't think of an organization I've talked to who they don't have some role or some function somewhere that they're working on. What does development look like for this capability? Whether it's data science or what, I mean, there's something somewhere in your org, somebody's done this work on that will float to the surface of, hey, this would be a really good opportunity to pilot and run one of these things and see how it works, to figure out all that interoperational stuff that you can then scale it out.
Yeah, and I'll even add just one last idea here, which is building out these programs can take a lot of time, be very intensive. I think there's also this opportunity to say, hey, before we build out this really robust data science program, let's offer to pay for, anyone who wants to take an introductory data science course, certification, workshop. Let's say, if you raise your hand, we'll pay for you to participate. And let's see, does no one bite? Or, do we have tons and tons of interested people? Because gosh, it would really be frustrating to build out a whole robust program experience.
And on a guess.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I think your point of, I don't think I've been in an org where somebody doesn't have one of these somewhere, that work is being done on it. Or to your point, even going back to the beginning of our conversation, a lot of orgs now are at a point where they have the content there. You can look at the data to see, who are the people and what are the topics that are of the most interest that you could go, we've got this general interest on this kind of level 1 skill sharpening, but how do we get that skill sharpening crew to actually go beyond that skill sharpening? And I think we've got access to this stuff if we're thinking strategically about it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Taylor, as always. I always enjoy our conversations. And even for me, it's been great to get further clarity on how you're approaching this and what, the academy language. I'm more bought into it now. Okay. Before I was a bit of a detractor on the academy, but it's really academy enablement and kind of that mindset and bringing it to life versus creating some other curated, pathway of information for people to go through. So I'm sold, and I appreciate you joining me. And yeah, we'll definitely be in touch as this continues to evolve throughout. So thanks for making the time.
Thank you, Christopher. Yeah, really appreciate it.
All right. Have a great one, everyone.
Okay.